So hi everyone. I'm the, so I'll just try to introduce myself. A dozen years of experience in doing product development. I'm passionate about building and debugging teams. At present, I do two roles. One is like the operations for, and also I lead a few engineering teams. So this talk is actually based on an article that I wrote a few months back, and it's more basically why do we need to do estimation, and what are the reasons why a lot of times we go wrong on estimations. And this context for this is mostly to a period of like only 2 weeks. Basically, and what are the estimation techniques to use to overcome the reasons that we fail to estimate. I think that probably I'm trying to write another article soon. But this doesn't cover that. To start with, like, what is an estimate? I think many of us are very clear that it's a rough calculation of the value. Sometimes what becomes hard is many people forget the rough part and they an actual calculation of the value. For the given understanding of the scope, and like especially for software projects, there are two things that we find it as expected outcomes. One is time, and the other one is cost. Just like a travel estimate helps in travel planning, say if I want to choose a location for vacation, I just choose two factors. One is like the time and cost for different locations. Those, if it falls into my budget, I'll make a decision to choose a place. Probably if my budget falls within Europe or Dubai, I would have priorities. I would see like if both of these in my budget. I think many of you would be familiar with this. One thing I think what it reminds us is basically in the ancient days, of the constrained seasons. And for example, what winter is coming means is basically keep prepared for getting things done or estimate things to be done before winter. Lot tied up with seasons probably sometimes if it is, I'm talking about software projects. But let us start imagining like a very simple use case. So we have a 10 kg box and we want to move it from point A to point B, and it lies 100 meters away. And how much time it takes, like just imagine an estimate for this. The next one is just like you have 8 people, and then you can increase the box size also. Say you have a box of 100 kgs, and then you want to carry it. If you have an idea of Himalayas, probably say from Lukla to Everest Base Camp, and then think about how much time it estimate. You add points on like increasing the weight of the box and increasing or like the team doesn't say same, right? Like think about like what happens if the people limit search while using the box and try to imagine an estimate. Now here is the final statement. You are Columbus and you have a team of 12 people. You need to find a new island. You have some experience in exploring new islands. Team, it's also distributed. I think with an unknown area trying to find it, I think we are just getting closer to what it sounds like and software project estimate. It's like an adage, but everything changes over time. Like if it is especially more than 2 weeks, the like at least when we are estimating versus the time we get to delivery, which is few months, change, requirements change, and the business itself changes sometimes. And any estimation done, hence, with a timeline of more than few weeks, or like quite uncertain. Take an example of Sydney Opera House. So in 1957, there was a design competition for Sydney Opera House. There were 233 designs from 32 countries. Many of them were from famous architects of that won the competition. The project was originally scheduled for 4 years with a budget of 7 million Australian dollars, but it ended up taking 14 years to be completed with a cost of 1 million Australian. That is almost 1457% over time, over budgeted, and 10 years delayed. This is an extreme example of, obviously, it's an extreme example of estimation failure, but I'm not going to give you extreme examples to prove that estimation is wrong. So let us take software or IT reveals that 1 in 6 software projects has a cost overrun of 200% and a schedule overrun of 70%. And level, which is very time taking. Because there's no other way of going to get estimate at granular level correct, especially at the beginning of the project. Then what do we actually estimate? Estimation and not exact estimation. So nearly every software project, when they want to start, they start with 2 questions. And should I incur? And the common answer that we get is like let us estimate, we'll estimate and get back to you. And there are like 2 types of people. What makes money, the stakeholders are happy, the board of directors are happy, and the customers are engaged. And on the other hand, we have engineers who needs to get the estimations done. One of my friend gave me this idea of estimations is a game plan to make people to commit to a shorter, like he started this way saying that estimation and we things, and that underestimation is done by us, so it puts a kind of pressure within us to get things done in the correct time that we try to estimate. Teams hate estimation because one, it takes a lot of time and it's also often abused. So stakeholders sometimes take these estimates into maximums and get upset if the team doesn't is the general case. From the stakeholder perspective, they make commitments to the board and customers with these estimates, and probably say, for example, there is something there, can you say probably 3 months, or the team says 3 months, they'll go and commit saying that this feature will be available before Christmas. So that part of like estimation is what we are going to talk about. And this definitely causes breaking the sustainable pace and a lot of tensions in the teams. One good place to start is to understand the constraints of projects, but I think I adopted it to represent it in a balance. So there are 4 factors. One is scope, quality, schedule, and cost. And anything, we want to keep this in balance, like always. Say, for example, we want a scope change, but as scope changes, there are other things that should be compromised. Say, for example, somebody wants to add a feature. The first thing to touch is, apart from the other 3, is also the scope other feature or like other small enhancement to remove the existing. Like you can trade it off and replace it. That's the best way. So the balance still remains same. Or are you okay to on quality, which is really hard unless it is not an external facing or something like that. And or if you can't compromise on trade-off, I can look at thing that we can trade on. Or other things is also like cost. So cost means sometimes like adding more people, adding more project. But this also has constraints. Like sometimes the cost part is taken as a kind of abuse. So many times I try to use this metaphor. So I say, like, if one woman can give birth to a baby in 9 months, can 9 women give birth to a baby? I think practically we cannot keep on adding people. There is Brooks law, and we should respect that fact. What is like again? This gets complicated because when we are actually measuring things, aspects of project, it becomes a little bit more complicated because it's really hard to measure few things. Cost and schedule, they are like proper metrics. Cost is like time, schedule is schedule is time, but quality is relatively hard because everybody's definition of quality keeps changing, and it's very very hard to especially get into discussions with product or like a business holding meetings. So that discussions become hard. So that becomes even harder to put a qualitative measure on the top of estimates. The hardest part is like scope because in software projects as close to traveling in space or like finding an unknown island, a smaller change may appear small, but it hits a lot of time or cost to get it done. So since it's very hard to keep the balance, one thing that can really help us is like pull past data and show that say if you don't do this quality, probably these are the bugs that come and which is really costlier these are things that we did in previous scenarios, and can we use this experience to do estimations right, and that becomes easier to talk about scope or cost. Allow scope changes, but should create a balance on should keep this balance right. Now, next thing is there are a lot of factors that definitely influence estimations. So they're like a set of theories. I'm not kind of moving through the catalog of them, but some of them are really so sometimes I'm not giving techniques, but at least it really helps us to talk during an estimation activity or like a planning activity to say these are the factors coming in, and that these factors are coming in, or like we can see these factors coming in. Say there is a polarizing effect, which I'll talk. Probably a person who is more influential gets his testing done easier because other people can't argue. Sure that they understand the point. If we understand that is going to hit us on estimates, because in the end we are all going to suffer. If when we, so the question, how much are you done when you say 90? Like a lot of times when we go to stand-ups or other meetings, we say it's like 90% done, and this thought he brings comes up in even in the estimates, because when we think 90% is done, we think the activity is done, and we put the same thought process to the estimation also. So this was like from Tom Cargill from Bell Labs. So he says that the first 90% of the code accounts for the first 90% of the development time. The remaining 10% of the code so if you can see, when we're estimating, we actually put this blue line, which shows that, okay, that's the actual 90% that I'm going to do. But when you're actually navigating the project or running through that, but there's a lot of if you expand that, this looks like the green line. And if you see this 10%, what we thought would actually be 90%. And what does that contribute to, right? That 10%, the 10% is basically some examples would be misread details or small UI UX tweets, some blockers, or like we get a lot of code review comments and like build failure, we go and fix it. What I feel personally is like this 10% is highly underestimated and consumes significant amount of time. And the best way is to just see how to and keep a track of it. The next factor is probably like, are we using the same scale? Especially when we go as a diverse team for estimation, like we start estimating by different styles. Basically, we say relative sizing or by years or by person. But what happens is be like there's a lot of idiosyncrasy that gets added. So my way of doing things or getting things done versus your way of getting things done is completely different, and put mental into the estimates. A good example is like of like one of the projects that I worked. We had an like especially experts probably I think um, we need to call out experts. For example, a 3D expert in our team, and when we were actually estimating, the person would give a day or two for estimate, and that probably card would look like it's 2 weeks for me, and it's really hard to get into a conversation because I was not mature enough to call it out at that time, and eventually found that after a month that he definitely suffered project deliveries. So when you are watching out during estimations on different scales, one thing is to just call out what are the estimates that we can like. It's really hard. It's not practical, but we can little bit try to be better, like trying to avoid anomalies of this estimation. Like is the concept of wishful thinking is a formation of beliefs and making decision according to what we think is more pleasing to imagine, and we don't we ignore all these arguments or rationality that actually working. Like somebody asked like especially a card, somebody comes in and asks a really hard question about that card, which may influence the estimate sometimes, and that definitely affects the estimates. So I think it should be called out, especially when somebody is trying to ask an hard question. It's worth to visit it before putting on estimates. The next one is like, are you trying to be nice with the group? So group think, it's a concept like we just try to suppress the right opinions, or like we don't evaluate options at all. So we just say like we come to a common point. I think this is experience. So estimation activity we get like say for a big project 3 days or 4 days time, and we start understanding as much as possible. We do an inception, and after that we come back and then put all these cards, put details as possible. But say after the end of third day we couldn't finish estimation, we are only 60% done. We get only one more day to estimate and come back. And it's going to be different when we are talking at that point. Mostly it will be like, can we have an approximate estimate? It's okay because we are 60% done. Can we get 40% approximation? And all this gets influenced basically over the is like 20% of the estimate, and we try to get faster. Like we don't we just go by group decision very fast and not try to evaluate the alternate options. And one more thing that I observed here in the same kind of pattern is polarization. I think especially there are like in the very highly opinionated. They come with very dominating estimates, and if the team has like more number of it will be hard to influence that person. So it's better to call out that and as a team try to make sure like everybody feels safe and the polarization doesn't come into the estimates. This one is like interesting. Some point what was happening and why we were failing in estimation. So this was the case. So we were trying to estimate, and we had kind of 10 people previous consulting company that were worked, puts like 8 consultant people with two senior people. And what happens is we start the estimation, and then we were using planning poker, and whenever we estimate, we come with a and we talk about those points and again estimate, and again 8 people or one of the 3 people get convinced, and it ends up like round estimation doesn't go longer. So people try to see only 1 or 2 times, and basically people think 8 people are right, and we end up trying to see a more democratic way of voting. Wrong sometimes because we're not repeating the activity. So this concept of Dunning-Kruger, this is called Dunning-Kruger effect. So people with different levels of expertise self-perceive their capabilities at different. So it's actually how well you know things that you know you are. Like this is actually how you well you are, and this is like how well you think you are. It's most of a mental model of how well you think. So what happens is like experience and rate themselves more. So that's where they sit here. And with people with moderate experience, they sit basically here and rank themselves less. Especially when you have like people, there is a more number of. It's better to call out during estimations or have this in. Keep calling about the Dunning-Kruger effect and say, do they really understand or like and come with the right numbers. The next one is anchoring, and so anchoring is a technique, especially put and that number, initial number, forms a very strong number around which the other numbers comes in. So anchoring is actually a human tendency to make decision by adjusting the initial value, which leads to the final result. So it's a simple, like there's a lot of times we start. It's a simple card. Let's estimate, and we should call it out. Like once that comes into the mind, people become uncomfortable giving actual estimates. Problem. The next one is like planning fallacy. So it's more about an optimistic bias. There have been like experiments run by Daniel Kahneman and Amos. So they found that by multiple events, try to put underestimate the time required. So these are all not probably all the concepts that I want to cover. They're like still more, but these are like majorly influential ones. And having this safety factor and calling out some of these factors even before estimation at least helps us to think where we may put things wrong. So concluding thoughts, I think we actually do is like we use estimates to do customer commitments. We say this comes up by December, like we ask the team how much time it takes. We say 3 months, then we go to the customer and say like it comes or we go done by December. I think that is a very wrong use of estimates, especially longer the duration of the project. The next thing, I think the best thing to do is like probably to use it in tool making. Available set of people with an available set of time and a fixed capital. How can we use estimation as a tool to choose the direction? Say, for example, and capital, and they are like trying to invest their time whether in a recommendation engine or build a mobile payments. They can use an estimation as a tool to choose one of them. And that right way to use estimation, especially the longer ones. Shorter ones are like completely fine, but longer ones, I think it should be used as a decision making tool. Yeah. So that's it. If you want to read the article, here is the link. If you have any questions, we can go ahead.
Hi, Ram. Thank you very, very much for the talk. I want to say that for me and for other Inaka folks, this talk hits every single lesson we learn over like many years. I actually wish I would have this talk given to us years ago, but one thing that I think you didn't talk about in this talk that was also a concern of us for a long time was since we were a consulting company, we had to run estimates before we even have a signed agreement with the client. And sometimes we spent a lot of time working on estimates properly to then be rejected. And so we didn't get any money for the time we spent on estimates. Do you have any advice on that? Or for instance, do you think it's worth charging your potential customers for an estimate?
Yep. I think one thing, like again, this is from my personal experience. So I worked for a consultancy company before, and then estimate. Actually, like there are different pricing models with customers. So with time and money, especially, it is really hard for the customer because if you don't reach the deadline, they really are going to suffer because they're going to pay more money. And the best thing is like to take some of the past projects and see harder on estimations. We came back very fast and we couldn't reach it. But also call out the balance, basically the iron triangle that I called out, and at least with all those 4 factors and say, keep on calling them. Like the one thing that we really fail is like, we definitely want to do the agreement because I know like I've been through that, and then people ask like how much time does it take, and somebody quotes something is somebody else says cost in more number of months. The consultants may end up choosing the other person, right? So that is a real hard thing. But we have to pull out the data and we have to show this data from different articles and convince the customers that we are doing the right thing. This is the history of the data. Or anyways, because we have committed on things like past, and we ended up paying more. The team ended up spending more time, and actually, I'm like the practice 2 years, and some of us were very clear that it can't be done in 1 year. But at that time, the desperation of getting the project was more important. But currently, I think that project created loss for the company and frustration for the customer. So it's better to call out with data, but it's really hard. I think it's a hard problem. Like it's how we understand.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Sorry, I was just coordinating with Brujo. Hey, Ran, thank you so much for the talk. I actually have 2 questions instead of 1 because this is a topic very important for me as well as a software developer and also as a startup founder. And this topic reminds me of an author. His name is James Haig, and he basically has a very radical approach to estimation, which is basically if you have never done something, then you don't know how long it's going to take. You can only know how long it's going to take something if you have done it before and you're just doing it for the second, third, or fifth time. So like discussing with these things with my co-founder, who's also watching the talk, by the way, he tells me this is an extreme approach, and I understand it's extreme. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's possible to estimate without like a project that you are doing for the first time?
Yeah. So as I told you, like, so if I understand the question, what I understood was estimate. Is that the question, right?
The question would be like, is it possible to estimate? I wouldn't say accurately, but actually, let me rephrase it. Do you think it's too radical to say that it's impossible to estimate something that you have never done? Or in other words, basically that the only estimations that are valid are estimations of things that you have done before?
I think anybody who has had practical experience, including, I think again it's my personal opinion, that obviously if you've done something before, it's very easy to comparatively before, and it's again we are like talking about agile where things change. We are agreeing to scope changes. I don't like it will break. It's really hard to give an exact estimate. That's my very strong belief. But at least we can get closer to the estimates if we keep on visiting it at regular intervals and keep putting our learnings and keep revising our velocity. And also, one more thing is like keep on telling the client that illusion of moving faster or like getting closer to the estimation can be done. But again, it's my personal opinion that we cannot correct strong estimate.
I understand. Yeah, I think I agree with your view 100%. And also, Brujo was saying yes with his head, like just the frequent updates and just letting the customer see your progress, or when you're doing it for yourself, like just having regular check-ins. That's a good way to see how you're doing over time and just reduce a bit the uncertainty of the estimation. So thank you so much. I'm just checking. Our former Hinaka, Steph Goldner, says this is the story of her life. She used to work as a project manager with us. So yeah, we've seen this a lot. So I think that's it. And we would like to thank you so much for your talk. And also thank you for submitting the talk, because there are 3 speakers, we had contacted them, and you just submitted the talk through the RFC modality we have on Eventil. So we really appreciate you being here and give us the talk.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
No, of course. Thank you. And so